After the American Civil War, it was decided that newly emancipated slaves needed their own land to secure their freedom. An order, Special Field Order Number 15, was issued, setting aside 400,000 coastal acres of land for black families. The order stipulated that each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground. The order also explicitly stated that no white people except military officers and soldiers detailed for duty would be permitted to reside in this area that had been set aside for black people. In addition, a provision to provide them with mules to work the land was later added. Unfortunately, this provision was almost immediately reversed. Inadequate as the plan was to try and mitigate some of the suffering of the newly emancipated people, that plan never materialized. It later became known by the popular phrase 40 acres and a mule, which Spike Lee adopted as the name of his production company, I believe to remind people of the unfulfilled promises to his ancestors. Rather than implement the plan, President Andrew Johnson reversed the order, allowing Confederate planters to regain the land. Now, this determination to appropriate land and keep black people from owning even land that they bought and developed with their own toil and sweat has continued to be repeated throughout the history of the US. It is what was manifested in the destruction of the Black Wall Street, along with the Greenwood Enclave in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which until recent times was hardly ever mentioned. However, what is most disturbing is that although the destruction of the Black Wall Street and the community that built it is now well known, it is not the only time that such a wanton destruction of black towns has happened. Doing the research for this episode had me stumped over and over again as I stumbled on the history of one destroyed black town after another. And yet, some still question the fact that violence against African Americans has continued to shape America. Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee so we can continue to bring you this series. Subscribe if you've not done so. And please turn on your notification button so you know when we have new episodes. Please share our videos with all your contacts. According to William A. Darity Jr., an African-American economist who collaborated with A. Kirsten Mullen, a folklorist, to co-author From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. Over 100 massacres took place between the end of the Civil War, the American Civil War, and the 1940s alone. So where does one even start? Please check out our episode on the destruction of the Black Wall Street, because I will not be going over that in this episode. Well, I guess Central Park in New York is as good a place as any to start. It is probably not news to many that a black community known as Seneca Village was displaced to build Central Park in New York. According to Central Park Conservancy, Seneca Village came into existence long before the American Civil War in 1825. So it came into existence in 1825 when landowners in the area subdivided their land and started selling it in plots. About half of the land parcels were bought by African Americans. Seneca Village was located along what is now Central Park's perimeter from West 83rd to West 89th Street. By 1855, the village had grown, with about 2/3 of the residents being African Americans. The other 1/3 was made up of poor Irish immigrants and poor people of German descent. Seneca Village was New York's first free black community, and it allowed residents to live away from the more built-up sections of downtown Manhattan and escape the unhealthy conditions and racism that black people faced there. It was a thriving community, and the Lyons family, one of the black families that lived there, worked hard alongside others to make New York City a place where people could live freely and fairly when the rest of the country was still struggling with overcoming centuries of slavery. The Lyons were not just property owners in the village. They also ran an underground railroad station. And Maritka Lyons co-founded one of the first women's rights and racial justice groups in the country. Now, Central Park was the first landscape public park in the United States. Advocates for creating the park were, of course, primarily wealthy white merchants and landowners who claimed that they wanted their city to have the kind of public grounds found in cities like London and Paris to give the city an international reputation. They also wanted a public park that would offer them an attractive setting for carriage rides. And so, when in 1853, the state legislature authorized the city of New York to use the power of eminent domain to acquire land in the center of Manhattan, Seneca Village was not spared. All the residents were required to leave by the end of 1857. But those who tried to cling on to their property had them destroyed during the New York draft riots in 1863. When the anger of the white working class New Yorkers over a new federal draft law during the Civil War sparked 5 days of some of the bloodiest and most destructive rioting in US history. The riots gave white workers license to physically remove blacks, not only from work sites, but also from neighborhoods and leisure spaces. The rioters, particularly the poor whites who had lived in Seneca Village alongside black people, used it as an excuse, an opportunity to express their hatred for the blacks and assert their superiority over them. The Lyons family, like others, were forced to flee the neighborhood. They were a bit luckier than most in that they were able to gather up a few belongings that they could carry with them. However, the moment they fled the city was the last time they ever resided in New York City. Black people fled to New Jersey and beyond. And by 18 1965, the black population had plummeted to a fraction of what it used to be. Central Park is in reality a testament to the black community that once thrived there. Thanks for watching. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee so we can continue to bring you this series. Subscribe if you've not, and turn on your notification buttons. Please don't forget to share our videos with all your contacts and keep those comments coming.